Good evening, Shavua Tov. Let's get right into the next section of Halachot. But first, as always, let's address this week's parasha, because especially now, the last few weeks, we've had a lot of time to read over the extreme details of this most important commandment building Mikdash. We have quite a lot of time to think about it and realize that this is the mitzvah of our day and age, the one that we have forgotten, the one to which we certainly owe a lot more attention. So we see here that the book of Exodus actually concludes where it rhymes. We're hitting many familiar notes. As the sages said, lost our connection. Hold on one second. Okay, we're back. Chazal said that the hatima has to be like the petiha, which means we have that ending is reminiscent of the beginning. The way we started the bracha, the way we started the sefer, the way we started the theme of the study harks back to the way we started. And the way we conclude, the way we conclude harks back to the way we started. And that gives rise to, of course, the chiastic structures we've seen throughout the Torah. So what are we talking about? First of all, the first commandment of this book, the book of Exodus, was given on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, about Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Chodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim, and get ready for Passover, because in a few days, they're going to be building a tabernacle. And exactly a year later, we see at the end of this week's parasha, Moshe Rabbeinu was given the commandment on the 1st of Nisan to set up the Mishkan, and that's what he did on the 1st of Nisan, a very auspicious day. The pillars of clouds and fire. It says when the Israelites left Egypt at the beginning of the Exodus, this is at the beginning of what we know as Parashat B'Shalach. So you see that there is the cloud of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, which was not. I wouldn't say it's physical. I think only those who can actually perceive such a thing saw it, but it was there. God's presence, so to speak, went before them, and apparently they departed, or they were not as close to the camp, whatever that may be, after the sin of the golden calf, and they returned. And from then on, they rested directly over the sanctuary in the midst of the people's camp. So that's very important. And it says that traveled with them, Bechol Masahem. We haven't even read about the Israelites departing Mount Sinai after constructing this tabernacle, but apparently, yes, it stayed with them. It descended. The cloud descended upon the tabernacle and it stayed there the entire time that they were traveling. Very important. Oh, how about the settlement of Israel? That is the children of Israel. First, it says that they settled in Egypt. At the beginning, they start off just 12 sons of Jacob, and it was actually 70 souls. And we conclude with a count here that's going to be more detailed in the book of Numbers, 603,550 men who gave the silver half shekels towards the construction of the tabernacle. That is going to be, by the way, the same number we arrive at in the book of Numbers, even though in the book of Numbers, the Levites are not included in the count, and some people must have come of age, and some people must have died. Very odd that this exact same number, a few months later. And we have the chorus as God commanded Moshe. Kasher Siwad Nayat Moshe. And that is, I don't know, you could count it. I remember one time I counted, I used to know the exact number. I could have counted it. How many times it said that. And that is actually another way of saying, as Rashi says, what a reach nicholach is. This afternoon we read in the beginning of Vayikra about how a korban is supposed to be offered for a reach nicholach, a satisfying aroma or a delicious aroma, whatever exactly it means. What does it mean that God smells the korban? No. Unklu says it's accepted with favor. And Rashi explains, al pi chazal, that it is God who has commanded. He spoke, he gave his commandment, and we did as we were told. So the expression reach nicholach, according to Rashi's understanding here, it's the same as the quite literal expression as God commanded Moses. And that's exactly what we're trying to do when we construct the tabernacle. We're looking for a vehicle for demonstrating our dedication to God's service and wanting to do exactly as he has commanded us. You think about it, this whole undertaking basically took place, according to the sages' calculation, between Yom Kippur and Hanukkah. There's not a lot of time, but they completed it all so quickly, and they actually had to wait a while before the inauguration of the tabernacle on the 1st of Nisan. This is a lesson to us that you could see when it comes time to rebuild the temple, it's also within our powers to make this go quite quickly. We could do it. The only are we to do it? And I certainly hope the answer is yes. Rabbi, someone directed me right before Shabbos to see that Rabbi Elboim, Ish Har Habayith, who's been dedicated for now decades to getting more Jews to visit the temple and keep the temple in their minds. I certainly believe that the more people who are going to visit the temple, just like anything, if there's lots of Jews going there, it'll be ours. And if Jews ignore the place, it will not be ours. Rabbi Elboim was saying, how could it be that there's this commandment? How many times do we have in the Torah where it talks about asitha, you shall make or you shall do? It says it so many times in this one commandment to build the tabernacle. Do this, and make it yourself. And yet you have so many well-meaning Jews who think that this commandment is specifically going to be taken away from us to perform, and now is going to be done, so to speak, by the hand of God. There will be a miraculous reconstruction of the tabernacle, of which we shall not take part ourselves. How could that be? This commandment is obviously one which we are supposed to be doing ourselves, and we should certainly want to take part in it. Another part of how this rhymes, just as an example, we see this is the first aliyah of Vayakhel, as it's known, and this is the fourth aliyah of Pikudei. This is a list of what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the people to construct. Every person wise of heart, that means person who has artistic skill and can actually produce things, should come and make all that God has commanded. And he has this list here, and it's basically recapitulated almost word for word in some places. Some psukim are identical. For example, this one, Bigdei Asarad, it's almost the same order. I've highlighted the major differences, but you see here, part of that chiastic structure. They were told what to do, and it's given right back the way they found it. And we're just going to pay attention to some of the details there. What's the point? Why all the detail? To tell you, you should care about detail. What the Torah thinks is important is given many details so that you know that you're also supposed to work hard for this. And you're going to say, well, a minute, the temple was not built like the tabernacle. Let's say, for example, the curtains that define the courtyard were replaced by, as we saw 2 weeks ago, were replaced by solid walls of stone. Yes, but the sages still related to them the same halachic categories. They saw them as a continuation thereof, and technically speaking, everything you did in the tabernacle is a minimum. At the minimum, barest minimum has to be this way. But if you want to go further and construct more permanent structures, that's totally fine. As a matter of fact, perhaps it's a hidur mitzvah. They couldn't make anything permanent. They couldn't build stone walls. They couldn't build stone walls to define the tabernacle courtyards or the temple edifice in the wilderness for obvious reasons, because they had to go somewhere. The fact that something wasn't made permanent only shows that they had yet come to that state of permanence. But once they do get to the state of permanence, these things should be replaced with superior materials and construction. So we see over here, this is the Mishkan, the Olo and Mechsehu. That was given very few details when Moshe Rabbeinu first told the people, but here explains what the Mechse is. The Mechse Orot Techashim, whatever the Techashim was, and the Orot Elim Odamim. And here, this is also an interesting difference. Moshe Rabbeinu told them to make the Aron and its staves, that's the Aron, that's the Ark of the Covenant, and its staves, and the Kaporeth, that's the lid on top, which had, the Keruvim carved out of it, or beaten out of it. And then he says the Parocheth of the Masach. That apparently was the Parocheth that divided between the Kodesh and Kodesh Kodeshim. So they were told to first make the Aron, and then make the Parocheth that was protecting it. Remember, no one saw the Aron after that. It was either on that side of the Parocheth, or it was covered with Parocheth when they traveled. And here it says the Parocheth precedes the Aron and its staves and the Kaporeth. Then we have the Shulchan. Over here, they're told to make once again staves for the Shulchan, but here when it says they actually did it, it doesn't occur. You have it's kalim and the showbread, but those don't occur. Next, Here they're told to make the Minorath Ma'or Keleha Neirotheha and Shemen Amor, and here it explains more what the Neiroth are, the Neiroth HaMa'aracha. So that's just a very small difference. Here they were told to make Mizbach HaKatoreth and its staves and the Shemen Mishcha. And here it just says the Mizbach HaZahav. Here, instead of describing the altar's function, it describes its main visible material. It was made out of wood, but it was covered in gold. That's what defined it. It was known as the golden altar. And it doesn't mention the golden altar's staves, once again over here, even though here they mention other staves. And here's the anointing oil and the Torah, of course, and the Masach Petach Ohel. That was the screen that basically behind the door of the, or in lieu of the door of the tent of meeting. Here you have the Mizbach HaOlah. Once again, like this Mizbeach, like this altar, its function is described. When they brought it to Moses, they describe its material, its most visible outward material. Once again, it's made out of wood on the inside, and it's filled with dirt, at least when in use, but it's described as the bronze altar. And here you have Mechbar Nechosheth, almost word for word over here, and the laver in its base. Over here we have something very interesting. This could be a whole, you can write a doctorate on this one. Here you have two verses. The Kalei HaChatzer, those are the curtains that defined the courtyard once again, and the pegs that held the Mishkan and the hooks and all that. But here, these two psukim are basically fused into one pasuk over here, which you could do. You just need to use lower level Talmim. Why is that the case? I do not know. I hope there's a good explanation. It would probably be very interesting. Here, this pasuk once again is almost word for word. We've described what the big day Sirad are, big machloket there, and how that became the word for misrad. And here it says they left, and here they came back. Here they went out from Moses, and here's where he saw it, and he blessed them for doing it properly. So this whole book has a rhyme. We've also seen earlier about how the whole latter half of the book of Exodus is one gigantic chiastic structure with also one central chiastic structure right there in Parashat Kitisa. And I recommend that you check out that video we uploaded sometime before the China virus, and you can see that there, or we'll try to re-upload and post a link in the description. Let's get into halachot here. Rambam was describing this courtyard, this room, which is adjacent to the courtyard. He called it the Moked. And whether or not it was actually within the inner temple courtyard, we saw was a dispute between the Mefarshim. Rambam had it completely outside. We saw the illustration there. And according to other Mefarshim, it was sort of bulging into the temple courtyard. And he says over here that it had 4 leshachot, just like the so-called women's courtyard had 4 leshachot. This one does also, except these ones were apparently all indoors, completely indoors. Shtayim kodesh u'shtayim chol. 2 were holy and 2 were secular. Once again, it doesn't mean that they're completely secular, because after all, this is the temple precinct. It means 2 were holier than the others. And they basically had, even if you say they were beyond the actual defined courtyard of the temple, as we saw last week, they still have the same sanctity of the temple courtyard. And he says, Rashi Pasif Asin, Mavdilin Bein HaKodesh V'Achol. There were basically markers. Imagine these pegs that they have in places in public squares so that automobiles don't drive there. There was these things sticking out of the ground to show people where was the holier and the less holy. Nowadays in Havdalah, we say Havdalah that goes between Yom Tov and Chol Moed. You say Mavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol. Even though technically speaking, Chol Moed isn't completely Chol, as we saw before, it's Chol enough compared to Yom Tov or Shabbos. But Shabbos going into Yom Tov, Mavdil Ben Kodesh L'Kodesh, those are both much higher levels. So even though, yes, Shabbos is holier, we say Kodesh L'Kodesh, okay? That's also a shear for next time. So what are these other rooms there for? Or for what are they there? Don't end this sentence on a proposition, on a preposition. Umeayu mishamashot ma'aravit romit lishkata tlaim. The southwest one was where they kept the lambs. When they kept the lambs, they always had to have lambs on hand and be checked for blemishes. Why? Lambs were the most common sacrifice offered in the temple, at least communally. Why? Every morning there was a lamb. Every afternoon there was a lamb. On Shabbos there was 4 lambs, double what we saw. And every day when they brought a musaf, they had at least 7 lambs. That is, every Rosh Chodesh, or every day of Yom Tov, every day of Chol Moed. On the Sukkot, it's even double, 14 lambs a day. So you see that lambs were by far the most common sacrifice, and therefore the most in demand. So they always had a few lambs there ready to go. Dromit Mizrachit would be the southwest corner, and that lishka was Osei Lechem Hapanim. That's where they would make the showbread by skilled Kohanic family, which preserved the secret of how to do it just right. Nowadays, you can go see this. There are those who are trying to find the right way to create an unleavened bread of that size and of the right specifications and shape. We'll see some illustrations. There's certainly controversy today, even today, about the exact shape of this showbread and what it means as corners and all that. You've probably seen a few illustrations yourself. I like the Chumashim, which have all the different illustrations, perhaps artist renditions of how these things are supposed to look. And of course, this involves knowing that this is unleavened bread we're talking about. Unfortunately, in the last 200 years, Jews have gotten used to the idea that unleavened bread can only be a cracker, and that's incorrect. Once you are baking the bread, it doesn't matter whether it's leavened or unleavened. You can have a perfectly new unleavened dough that is not risen, and it can still be thick, it can still be soft, it can still be quite good, and it doesn't have to end up a cracker. So, and when we start the temple, there's many other examples of types of unleavened breads that are certainly not like the matzahs with which we're familiar. We're back. Mizrachit Tzfonit, the northeast corner, was where the Beit Hashmonai hid the Avnei Mizbeach Shiktsum Malchei Yavan. What did they use this place beforehand? What does it say? It says the Hasmoneans took apart the old altar, which had been defiled by the Greeks and their cohorts, and they built a new altar. That's what Hanukkah was all about. Hanukkah Mizbeach. Where are they going to put these stones? These stones that made the old Mizbeach can't just be thrown somewhere else outside the temple. Then they might be used, and they're technically temple property of extreme holiness. They should not be used for anybody else ever again. So they basically hid them within the confines of the temple, maybe in that room or underneath the ground, whatever it may be. It's kind of strange. What did they use that room beforehand? Or is this Moked something that they only built after the Hasmonean period, or starting with the Hasmonean period? I don't know. Like other things, if anybody has any clues, once again, I'm also not quite sure when the Nicanor, who had actually commissioned the construction of the bronze doors to the inner temple courtyard, when he was around. So this is saying that also it says that apparently that's why they hid them there when they built the next altar. Tzfonit Ma'aravit Ba Yoredin Leveda Tvila. And the northwest corner is basically a way to get to the place of immersion, what you and I would call a mikveh. Now, there are many mikvot in the temple precincts, as we will see in the laws of Yom Kippur, but this was the main one that the priests used. There is a passage here that we have in the book of Samuel. We know that the way the tabernacle was built, there's only one edifice there. There's one room, it's the tent of meeting, and it has the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodeshim. And that's apparently the way it was when the Israelites were in the wilderness. But already we see in Shiloh, even though there was no extra structures that we see described specifically in that temple courtyard or the temple precincts, we do know that there was a place where the Kohanim slept and where the Levim slept. How do we know? Because Samuel was sleeping. He did not sleep within the temple. He worked as a Levite. It was his job to be a gatekeeper, and that's what it says he did. And Eli, the Kohen Gadol, lived in the vicinity of the temple, so much so that basically he was there. Where were they sleeping? It must be they had a specific place to sleep, just like we're describing here with the Kohanim, where they lodged overnight, at least those who were on duty, and they would need to immerse themselves every time they were to put on their priestly vestments. We actually see that also for the first time this week's parasha, the process of inaugurating the first batch of priests was that they should wash themselves in water, which is always a reference to immersion in mikvah. And then Moses was to dress them in their priestly vestments and then anoint them. And that act of anointing was to uh, count for them and all their progeny forevermore. And they would never have to anoint ordinary priests. And as we saw, perhaps they could anoint a high priest, but even then, a high priest did not necessarily have to be anointed himself. So they went to this Beit Tefillah that was under there, and it says, based on the Mishnah, that a person who went down to the place of the immersion from this room would continue in this Misiba Olechet Tachar HaMikdash Kulo. It was actually quite far. It goes under the entire temple. Does that mean under the Kodesh? I don't think so, but it was quite far. It leads him to another place on the Temple Mount. We don't know where. To the east, to the north, some other direction. I haven't seen any clarification on that. When I wrote Do Colt Mikana Mikana, and the candles lit to the right until the underground passage, basically. Until he got to the place of immersion. There was always a fire going there to keep people warm. And a lavatory for respect or out of dignity. Kavod Briot means not interfering with another person's privacy when he's relieving himself. It's very important. Kavod Briot is, I would say, everybody's right, although the Torah doesn't speak in terms of rights, but for lack of a better word, it's everybody's right to privacy with regards to intimacy, clothing, and taking care of one's call of nature. When doing these things, which basically involves being exposed, should never have to be exposed to other people. So v'zeu kvodo. So here's how they maintain people's dignity and privacy. Mitzvah means he found it na'ul. He saw that the door is closed. B'yadua sheisham adam. So he didn't have to knock. He knows there's someone in there. And if no one's in there, then the door would be open. And I wonder, like I heard here, there was just an incident, not such a bad incident, a local health clinic where the doctor is supposed to be waiting for the next person to come in. How do they know that the doctor is now open to see the next patient? Because the door is open. When there's a patient inside, the door is closed. For whatever reason, someone closed the door behind himself when he left the doctor, and the doctor was there checking something on the computer, because all doctors have to work with computers here in this country. And no one went in. Everybody's waiting, and the doctor's wondering why no one's coming in. They just wasted time. What happens if someone closed the door accidentally? How long would it take? As a matter of fact, this is how Ehud ben Gera was able to escape Eglon's goons after he assassinated Eglon. He put Eglon in the chamber that Eglon used for his own personal needs, and he closed the door. So Eglon's servants thought that Eglon must have been doing exactly that, even though he was long dead. And they waited a really long time. It says they waited until Bosch, until like it was a little bit embarrassing, and then they finally broke into there and realized what had happened. So that's my question here. How long would they give time? Apparently they had their own system, but that's basically what it is. The dignity is that someone would not be bothered when he needed to take care of this. Also, halacha, as we see, will be that if a Kohen does take care of nature's call, then he has to completely immerse himself in the mikveh, a very high standard, before going back to work. The length of this courtyard from east to west, from west to east, that would be from the backside of the temple courtyard behind the temple edifice until the main gate on the east, Me'al Shmonim V'Sheva. We saw as 187 amot. V'zehu cheshbonan. And now he's going to break it apart. We have an illustration. Once again, we'll see this soon in the Steinsaltz edition put up by Chabad.org. You're going to divide this area. A person who walks in from, let's say, the west, where normally you don't walk in, is in a certain area, and then there's more areas defined as he continues in that direction. Mikotel ma'aravi shel hazara ad hakotel ha'echal achadas rema, between the westernmost wall of this courtyard until the back wall of the echal was 11 amot. And these, you could actually calculate this now. You could see roughly where this would be. There's a staircase on the western edge of the main platform that is where the temple should be standing. You can see there's not a lot of space there. 11 amot, we said, was just a little bit more than 15 feet, because every amot is basically a foot and a half. The orech ha'echal kulo me'ama. From west to east, the temple took up 100 amot, so that's 111 so far. Bein ha'olam v'mizbeach esrim u'shtayim, between the ulam, that is the front chamber of the temple, which was never closed, the anteroom basically, until the altar was another 22. So this 111 plus 22 gives us a total of 133. HaMizbeach shloshim u'shtayim, another 32 amot is the length of the Mizbeach, which we saw a few weeks ago. So 133 plus 1 plus 32 comes out to 163. Sorry, 165. Makom drisat raglei kohanim. There's a place where the kohanim are supposed to be going to the exclusion of others. V'hu nanikra ezra kohanim. So this is called the priest's courtyard, even though technically speaking, it's not its own separate courtyard. There's no place that says kohanim only are allowed here. The Rambam said, yes, part of the definition of a temple is there are certain places where we say ad kan for certain people. So people should not go into the kohanim's place, but there was no physical marker on the ground that indicated that that's the Ezra kohanim. Achadas Rama, another 11 amos, and that leaves just makom drisat raglei Yisrael for ordinary Jews to walk around. V'unikra Ezra Yisrael Achadas Rama, and is another 11 amot. Is there anything significant about the multiples of 11 here? You see, for example, that the Azarah, this space, the first space is 11 amos, and then you have 22 amot here, and then 11 amma space and 11 amma space. I haven't seen anything yet about that, but I'm pretty sure whenever you see these recurring numbers in halacha or in the Torah, there usually is some significance. 11 is normally not a significant number, let's say like 7s or 8s or 40. But there is something. Once again, I invite anybody who has an insight into this to please share with me. And as we're going to see soon, these aren't all level places. Between the temple ulam, that is the anteroom, and the mizbeach, there's quite a few steps. From the bird's eye view, if we are not looking at elevations, this would look pretty neat. But a lot of these are on steps and different elevations. So too over here, there are steps from Ezrat Yisrael down to Ezrat Kohanim, and we'll see that in the picture. So let's put that up here, if I could find it. Also, I thank everybody for their patience. Seeing some of these pictures is a little bit difficult when we share the screen. We don't have it here. Here it is. Here's the picture, and I'll put it up here. And tell me if you could see it, by the way. If you have trouble seeing it, just tell me. Nope, this is not the right shared screen. Here we go. So this is what the Rambam describes over here. This space is the 11 amos between the back wall, the westernmost wall, and the wall of the Kodesh Kodeshim. Once again, we see these spaces, very interesting, how the temple had all sorts of entrances around it. And then you have 22 amot here between the ulam and the mizbeach. The mizbeach itself has a width of 32, technically speaking, even though some of this was blank space over here. This wasn't. This, we said that the base of the mizbeach was complete on these sides, but over here the base was missing, basically an amma in each direction. There's this Ezrat Kohanim, and this is the Ezrat Yisrael. It's actually kind of narrow. You think the Israelites themselves were told not to go beyond certain areas, although technically speaking they could. We even said previous instances we saw that there was sometimes when crowded, even pushed into the Elam when they shouldn't have. So this is the area over here. This is called Ezrat Yisrael, and there's all these different areas or structures where they did other things that we'll describe now. The HaMoked that we described over here, here's the 4 rooms that we saw just before. And it's also going to be divided from north to south. Remember, in these illustrations, west is on top, so north is on the right side. So they divide up these a total of 187 amot. Back to the text itself. Here we go. As we saw also previously, the width from north to south was 135 amot. Here's how it factors in. Between the northern wall and the Beit HaMikvahim, which is basically the prep area. That's where they would prepare the slaughtered sacrifices. The modern Hebrew word mitbach comes from this word that means a kitchen. For was basically 12 feet. This Beit HaMachim itself was 12.5 amos wide. Also, that's not so much. It comes out to just more than 18 feet. That's where they would hang and skin the kodashim, sacrificial meats. It's important animals after their slaughter. The blood was thrown on the altar, and then they had to be skinned and dismembered, and sometimes the entrails removed. The forbidden where they would do this. And the next one, Uvtzido, Makom HaShulchanot Shmoneh Amot. Lost the connection. Hold on, please. Okay, we're back. Next to it is this place of the tables also, for more preparation. That was only 8 amos wide, 12 feet worth of shulchanot. Uvo shulchanot shel shayish shemanichim aleim. They had these tables made out of marble, and that's where they put the pieces of the individual sacrifices. Remember, they would cut the leg and the arm, the forearm, the heads, etc., as we'll see in the laws of Maser Korbanot. And they say shayish because they felt that these had a cooling effect on them. That is, you leave, there's a lot, basically these things are in the sun. And let's say if you made these tables out of, they felt that wooden tables seem to absorb more heat from the sun. They get hotter in the sunlight, and that would cause these meats which are basically fresh to perhaps spoil. Even a slight difference in temperature prevents meat from spoiling. There's a world of difference if you put meat in the sun on a hot surface in the middle of the summer, and if you put it at least on a surface that has the effect of channeling away some of that heat. And that's where they would also rinse the meat with water in order to cook it. It was they wouldn't cook any of the meat put on the altar. No meat is ever cooked and then placed on the altar. That's strictly forbidden, apparently. Meat was salted. Anything that had to be put on the mizbeach was salted. But it's talking about the sacrificial meats that the Kohanim themselves would eat. There was 8 tables. There was also the place of the rings, which was 24 amos wide. That's apparently where they would do the slaughtering. And that's where they would actually slaughter these sacrificial things. Now, it's a machloket what those rings were for. So there's some Rishonim who say that in what way? So some have it that they would basically lock their feet, lock the hooves, and hold the animals by the legs so the animals wouldn't move for slaughter. Some say no, there are much higher rings, basically to hold the animal's head still for slaughter. I don't know. I've never seen it. I also, like every other thing, we pray that we be given insight into this and live to see what is the truth, or what the truth will be decided. Next, between this place of the rings and the actual altar was another 8 amos, just about 12 feet. Once again, the altar has a base of 32 amot. And to its south was this ramp leading up to the altar that basically took from measuring on the ground, not the hypotenuse of the ramp, but the base of the ramp was 30 amot. Uvein ha-kevesh v'la-kotel drumi 12 amo mechza. In between the base of the ramp where they would enter the ramp and the southern wall of the courtyard, amot. And it makes you wonder. Yes, it was a miracle. So much going on in the temple courtyard, not so much space to stand around. You can imagine when these places were crowded on Yom Kippur. For example, when they say this, when they opened the temple already, there was so many Jews there, it's just packed. You can imagine on Passover, when it came time to prostrate themselves, Chazal say there was a miracle. They always had room, and there was it could have been omdim tzfufim. It was packed. There was a standing room only, shoulder to shoulder. But when it came time to bow, at least they had room at that point. Mikotel tzfoni shel azarad kotel mizbeach. From the northern wall of the Azara until the wall of the altar, basically 60, a width of 60 and a half amot. And opposite that, from the wall of the ulam until the eastern wall of the Azra, which is basically 76 amot. Kol merubah hu hanikra tzafon, v'hu makom sheshochanim bo kodshei hakodashim. This is considered the north of the temple courtyard. Why? Because that's where you can slaughter the holier sacrifices, the sin offering, and the alot. Let's look at this on the picture, because what the world's finding as the north is actually not upon by other versions. They say it's the Kodel Toni Azara. Internet, hold on. Okay, back again. The northern wall until the Mizbeach. So that would be 60 amos. You look on the map over here. I'm looking at this over. It does come out to about 60 amos. Because there's the Mizbeach was basically almost halfway through. Is 100. Someone's want to come in. Hold on. Okay, thank you. You can see on the map here, which I want to show, but I can't show these documents at the same time. So we're going to stay with this one. It says it's a square. It basically goes from it includes some space, which is itself west of all that, and it's where you can slaughter these sacrifices. Definition. They say no, it has to be specifically just on the north side of the altar, but doesn't include anything to the west of the altar. And Rambam does allow for certain areas to the west. He says it's a merubah after all. It has to be 6 amot. Some say no, it basically comes out to a rectangle, a more limited thing. But by the way, when he says merubah, he doesn't mean exactly a square. Nowadays, we make a distinction. We say a square is a rectangle which has 4 equal sides, but that's not what the Rambam and others mean when they say a merubah. They mean any quadrilateral. There's no exact square here. Just saying that the Rambam defines the area that's considered north, the north of the Yerech HaMizbeach Tzafona. So it says that north is basically supposed to be north of Mizbeach. So some say no, it could be the north side of the courtyard. Good machlokas. We also look to see what a Sanhedrin will rule in this case, which definition of the northern area it will be. Why does it matter? Well, technically speaking, most sacrifices that are not holy of holies, that is, they have a part that can be eaten by non-Kohanim, think peace offerings, Thanksgiving offerings, Korban Pesach, the Shalmei Chagiga, the peace offerings we bring on Yomim Tovim, to celebrate those holidays. Those are eaten by regular people. Those are considered regular Kodashim, and they could be eaten anywhere in Jerusalem. They could be slaughtered anywhere in the courtyard. The Kodashei Kodashim are the ones that are not eaten by regular people. Like I said, the burnt offerings, the olot, and the chataot, those are eaten by Kohanim, so those must be slaughtered in the area that's defined as tzafon. And we're going to see it also this week's parasha. It says it quite quickly. It says, well, they have to be slaughtered on the north side. Okay, one more halacha over here. He says, Shmoneh Leshachot hayu be'ezrat Yisrael. There were 8 of these rooms in the Ezrat Yisrael. As we saw on that map, the Ezrat Yisrael is basically 11 amos wide from east to west. Yet it's not just one open area. There's quite a few things going on there. There's 3 in the north side, 3 in the south side, and that doesn't add up to, we'll see more. Sheba the Rom, Lishkata Melach, Lishkata Parva, Lishkata Medichim. There's a place where they kept the salt. The Parva place, it doesn't mean that, it means a different chamber. Parva apparently was someone's name. That's what they named it after. And our expression nowadays, saying that's non-dairy and not meat contaminated, is called parva, but that's a much later terminology. And the rinsing the meats. Lishkat Melch, he says, Sham notnim melach lo korban. That's where they would salt the korban, because there's a commandment to make sure to put salt on everything that is offered. Lo tashbit melach brit elokecha me'al kol minchatecha. And Lishkata Parva, Shamulchim Kodashim. There they would salt the skins of the Kodashim. That's not part of the sacrificial service. Instead, the skins of the sacrifices were distributed among the Kohanim, at least the public sacrifices. So people brought their own sacrifices, they had that skin. But this why animal killing was a commodity. It was how they used to make leather and cloth and all sorts of other things, which didn't go to waste. So it needed to be preserved. It does come from an animal, and the first stage is salting it. Familiar with Masechet Yom Kippurim, you've seen this. What is the Beit HaParva? That's where they had one of the immersion places for the Kohen Gadol. He did not immerse that day during that service. We're disconnected. He did not immerse in the one that we previously saw in the Moked all the time. That's where they would wash the end of these holy sacrifices before. Yes, the animal is dismembered, but it's very proper to wash off the extra blood and other things that you may find inside the animal's abdominal cavity before burning those things on the altar. There's also a pathway, basically a staircase, and a connection there also to get to the roof of the Beit HaParva. And I guess that takes us to the end for tonight. Don't forget, send in your questions, comments, or other information that we've requested. And we look forward to putting all these halachot into practice speedily and soon. Have a good week.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org. If you are inspired by Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to get involved in Torah Eretz Yisrael activities in your local area, please fill out the relevant form by going to the link which appears on the screen.